This is the 7200 f4 on the Sony A7 III, and then this is the AK4500 from Feiyutech, which is a new gimbal. Thought I'd try something a little bit different and balance this on this and try out a shot that I've never shot before. So I went to Toronto, met a few guys, and we shot this. You will have probably seen this shot before done by Michael Bay, by other people. It's popular in Hollywood films to give you that trippy look. And the way you do it is with a telephoto, a zoom lens that has a larger focal length, and essentially you zoom in on your subject, compressing the background. The background is completely blown out because of the compression, and then when you make a slight movement around somebody, it looks really trippy, it looks really cool. Because your subject's in focus, the background isn't, and then that movement is exaggerated. I wanted to try it on the Feiyutech AK4500 because it does support up to 4.6 kilograms, which is a ton of weight. This is a very front-heavy setup, so I thought it would be a great test for it, and I'd also learn some stuff at the same time. So I tried out this shot, I learned a few things, and I want to quickly go over what it is that I learned, and if you're thinking about doing this shot yourself, some things to bear in mind. I probably did this the wrong way, but I didn't research doing this shot at all before I went out to do it. I knew in my head what I wanted to shoot, and I just went out and tried to shoot it, which in hindsight, I probably could have researched it first, but I think this was a better learning experience. So every little movement you make, even the tiniest little movement on the gimbal, would normally be smooth. When you're on a zoom telephoto lens, it's not the case. Any movement is sudden, it's harsh, it looks like it's a jerky movement, it doesn't look like you're on a gimbal. So I quickly learned that, and the way that I counted it was by shooting in 120 instead. I wanted to shoot in 120 and 24 to show you the difference between the two, but I ended up shooting most of the stuff in 120. 1 second can now become like 5 seconds when you're shooting at 120. So that gives you a lot more space, a lot more freedom, and those jerky, quick movements that I had are gonna be a lot more subtle and not as obvious, and it's just gonna look better. With the 24 frames a second shots, if you want that jagged, almost handheld look, then that's great. But if you want it to be really smooth and flowy, you're probably gonna need to slow it down. I did find it was a bit too distracting when you're at 24 frames a second. Just my opinion, you may think differently, but at least what I thought. I'm more of a run and gun style shooter, and I prefer using autofocus when I can. Something that I did learn with this, because you're making such quick movements and you're zoomed all the way in, the autofocus will sometimes have a bit of a harder time focusing. Once it is focused, it tends to move around a little bit, so it wasn't always staying locked on. So if you're trying this out, maybe consider trying manual focus as well. Manually focus on your subject first, and then as long as you don't move back or forwards and you're just circling around them, keeping that same distance, manual focus will actually work better. Overall, it was fun to try out. It was something different. I'd never shot this before, so it was a good learning experience for me, and I'm passing on my knowledge to you now in case you're thinking of doing something similar. So let's talk a little bit more about the gimbal itself, the Feiyutech AK4500. So they did actually send me this. This video isn't sponsored. They just sent me this to give my opinions on, my feedback on, to make this kind of a video for you guys. Last month I did a video on the AK4000, and there was a few things I wasn't a fan of. They've done a pretty good job at improving them on this gimbal. One thing I will say, this gimbal is completely capable of balancing that setup on here. No issues whatsoever. It wasn't putting any extra stress on the motors. They handled it completely fine. When the gimbal's turned off, it balances completely fine. So that shows you that it balances on it all right. A lot of gimbals are starting to become very, very similar, and they all have the same modes and the same features on them. Because of that, I'm not going to give you a full review of this. I'm just going to tell you what it is I like and what it is I don't like. It does come with all the same modes that the AK4000 had and most other gimbals had as well. So inception mode, lock mode, pan follow, all those modes it has. In the standard kit, it does also come with a follow focus, as well as this detachable, controllable handle, which I'll talk more about in a bit. Good things, it can support up to 4.6 kilograms, which is a ton of weight. You saw that I was using this setup on the gimbal, very, very front heavy setup. Even when something is under the weight threshold of what the gimbal says, sometimes if it's front heavy, top heavy, it just won't balance. This is a very front heavy setup. If you're not familiar with this lens, is quite heavy. Even with the cage on here too, it's a heavy setup and it balances just fine. I did find if you really push the gimbal around, like flying it around, it would randomly flip upside down and then think that upside down is the right way up, and it wasn't.
Well, now we're upside down. Good. Perfect. I suppose if that's the look you're going for, it's good.
But you wouldn't normally get that because you're not going to be pushing the gimbal as hard as I was. I just did it as an example. This handle here does attach right on here. There's 2 1/4" thread knobs. You unscrew those, this comes off. This also detaches. But if you have it all on there, it all acts as one handle and it feels really solid. It is great for carrying in underslung mode. I had the 7200 on here with the A7iii, and that's a heavy setup. Carrying like this is so much easier and so much more forgiving on your back and on your arms than having to carry like this where all the weight is up top. Just a much nicer experience to have to lug this around with you. If you're walking around shooting a ton of stuff in different locations, you don't want to pack it all up, get it all out again, you can carry with this. It's easy. It also means when you're using the gimbal, you have 2 methods to hold on to it so it doesn't hurt your back and your arms as much, and you can guide with this hand to do movements. It's just a bit more ergonomic, a bit more user-friendly, just a much nicer experience to use if I'm honest. As you've probably seen here, it has the locks on all the axes. So now I can lock it off, oh, not like that. Now I can lock it off like that. It just stays as one piece all together, and it's way easier to pack, way easier to travel with. And when you want to quickly balance one axis, you can unlock that one, balance it, lock it again. Now I can go and work on this one, balance that one, lock it again. Every gimbal should have this as standard now. It's such a convenient feature to have, and I love that they managed to put this in. It now has a detachable plate, which you can pop your own plate on, which is what I did. It's on the bottom right here now. So what that means is when you want to attach your camera to this and then take it back off, you don't have to rebalance it every time. With the AK4000, that wasn't the case, and it was a pain. Every time you put your camera back on, you had to rebalance it. Not the case now, so thank you for fixing that, Feiyutech. And the whole thing breaks down into your camera bag nice and easy. This obviously comes apart, so that comes off. That detaches too. So your whole gimbal is that, and that fits into a bag way easier than my Moza Air 2 does because it doesn't come apart. I use the Lowepro 450AW version 1, there is a version 2 but don't have it, and it fits, that gimbal fits into the bottom of the bag with my A7iii, 7200, A6400, 85 and the Sony 24G Master. All my accessories, batteries, chargers, all that stuff, had that in the bag with the gimbal, no problems. That's good. So this handle, which detaches and reattaches to use as a handle, also acts as a remote control. So it's its own battery powered unit, charges through USB-C, that is good. It has the ability to do this. You have to connect it through Bluetooth for the very first time, and then that's it. It stays connected, turn it off, it disconnects, turn it back on, it reconnects automatically, which is good. It's kind of gimmicky right now because I will say there is a little bit of delay. If you're using the little joystick D-pad here or the knob on the side here, it's actually instantaneous, there is no delay. But for the motion gestures, moving it left and right, up and down, it's a little bit slower, a little bit buggy almost, and it doesn't seem to follow quite as quickly as your hand does. So bear that in mind. It's a nice idea. It's definitely in its infancy still, I think. I think we'll probably start seeing this a lot more on gimbals now, and it's gonna get better and better. Good idea, kind of gimmicky right now though. Now the bad things about this gimbal, it loses its horizon more than any other gimbal I've ever used, and what I mean by that is when it's balanced on that axis, it kind of drifts off a bit immediately after turning. I've tried calibrating when it's attached to the gimbal, because you can calibrate when you put a new lens on, just so it knows how powerful to set the motors to, and it still loses its horizon, and I don't know why. You can map this button on the side here to correct your horizon line. However, every time you turn it off and then turn it back on again, you have to go back in and set this to do that same movement to control the axes that way, and that's a pain. I don't know why it does it. I haven't had a gimbal that does it quite as bad as this. Even the 4000, the AK4000 from Feiyutech, didn't do it quite as bad as this does. So I'm not sure why that is. It can be quite frustrating if you're not shooting in 4K. If you're shooting in 4K, it's a quick fix. You can zoom in by 10% and then just adjust your horizon by 0.5% to get it corrected, crop out the rest and you're good. But if you're shooting in 1080 and you don't want to lose any quality, you have to make sure that it's straight to begin with. So there we go, that is the Feiyutech AK4500, a gimbal that allowed me to do the nice Michael Bay-esque shots. and it's pretty fun to play around with. Yeah, I'll pop the links down below for that gimbal if you are considering picking it up. It's the Feiyutech AK4500, not the AK45. Don't think you can buy that on Amazon. That's that. Appreciate you watching today. There's some buttons down below. You can go ahead and click if you want to. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video. See you later. If you're thinking about picking up this gimbal, is the AK4500.
Here's what I found.
Shush. Ugh.
It's smooth, you can't really break it. It's quite heavy.
Don't say that.
If I wave this around, do you mind sending it to me? Yeah, so I want to just like, I find this is a good